So I had a reputation as being the music guy. So this brigade commander says, "Hey, Mike, would you like to be the band commander?" And I said, "Sir, I'm a lawyer. You know that." I goes, "Mike, I heard you were a musician." I said, "I am, but not a good one." So why do you want me to be the band commander?
Hello, and welcome to episode 67 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of August 18th, 2025. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including, depending on where you live, a hometown drum corps may have done well. Some thoughts about AI. Some thoughts from one of my very first trio section guests. And I conclude my conversation with Mike JOLIN. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. We'll talk about other stuff as well this week, but it's been 9 days since DCI Finals wrapped up, and 14 days since I spent a considerable chunk of podcast time on a particular entrant in that horse race. And not only am I still kind of buzzing from the week's competition results, I am quietly gloating about having chosen to address that particular Boston area corps. Not the first time that a New England team has put an 8-decade championship drought to bed, but even the Red Sox had already claimed a title before that drought. So, go on and change that sign in the workplace to make it read 0 years without a DCI title, and away we go. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Indianapolis, Indiana. Drum Corps International's 2025 competitive season is complete, and we have winners. And this podcast's New England, UMass Amherst, and Drum Major Academy roots figured prominently in the results. In the second season of DCI competition for former DCA all-age drum corps, the title went again to the Reading Buccaneers. Their show, called On Display, was good for a 97.525 final score on the strength of a sweep of the brass, percussion, color guard, visual, and general effect captions. The title was Reading's 15th in the last 17 competitive seasons, dating back to 2005. Within this competition, there was one other result of note to listeners of this podcast. The all-age silver medalist corps was the Hawthorne Caballeros, led on the field by their first all-female drum major team, one of whose members was BandWagon trio section guest Jenna Foley. They kept the Buccaneers honest by posting a final performance score of 95.775, just a point and 3/4 behind. The open class competition, and again for us experienced corps watchers, that used to be Division 2-3. In that area of the competition, the title went to the Spartans of Nashua, New Hampshire. It was their third title in a row and the fourth in the last 5 DCI competitive campaigns dating back to 2019. They also swept all 5 individual captions. This competition was the Spartans' last as an open class corps. Next year they will compete directly with world-class corps like the Blue Devils and Phantom Regiment and one other group. Namely, 2025's DCI World Champion with a score of
98.425. 98.425 to the Boston Crusaders.
Their program, entitled Boom, never placed lower than second at any DCI-sanctioned competition this entire summer. In accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, and who better to be up on that subject than I will call for a point of personal privilege, and yeah, we're going to talk Minuteman Band for a moment, bear with me. Among its 3 caption wins at finals, top brass, percussion, and color guard, the Crusaders' percussion score was 20 points out of 20. The last time a DCI percussion group achieved a perfect score at finals was in fact the first time that had ever been done. Trivia question: what do the 1987 Garfield Cadets drumline and the 2025 Boston Crusaders drumline have in common, apart from that perfect score? Trivia answer: they were both led by largely University of Massachusetts affiliated instructional and design staffs. Tom Hannum, of course, in 1987 with the Cadets. But this year, leading the Boston area corps percussionists were UMass staff and alumni including Ian Moyer, Taylor Yazwiak, Jim Ancona, and Ian Hale with the front ensemble, Jared Sullivan, Andrew Ricketts, Zach Schlicker, and Alex Beltran with the battery, all of them overseen by Director of Percussion Colin McNutt. This UMass alum says, yay. Of course, as we know, in all of this, the real winner is drum corps. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. I know, but it was. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. On the other side of this quick break, I'll offer up some thoughts about why only humans can pull off performances like Boston's DCI title show. Thanks so much for hanging with me. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this episode's second strain, a commentary I've been sitting on for a little while, since other pressing topics have seemed important to address at particular moments in the last month and a half or so. I go back a bit further with British comedian John Oliver than a lot of people. Some may have first encountered him as Jon Stewart's chief correspondent and sidekick on The Daily Show of some years ago, or more recently, he's been the host of HBO's Last Week Tonight. I'm pleased to say that I first figured out who this incisive wit was through his work on a UK satirical news podcast called The Bugle, nearly 20 years ago. In late June, his Last Week Tonight topic of the week was artificial intelligence, and specifically what has come to be known as AI slop. Oliver said that the spread of AI generation tools has made it very easy to mass-produce and flood social media with cheap, professional-looking, often deeply weird content, which has been nicknamed AI slop. And flooded, indeed, social media has been, with news articles, images, recipes, and other artistic creations. AI slop is basically the latest version of spam. Oliver addressed AI music, saying that it can sound quite close to the real thing, and it's very easy to create, which caused the CEO of one AI music generation company to say, in a clip from the Last Week Tonight episode, quote, "It's not really enjoyable to make music now. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of practice to get really good at an instrument or really good at a piece of production software. I think the majority of people don't enjoy the majority of time they spend making music." To which Oliver responded, quote, "Okay, first, and this is a hot take, I think a lot of people might actually enjoy making music. It's probably why they were doing it for the 40,000 years of human history prior to AI. But if that's not you, and you would rather make music by simply pressing a button, then good news, you don't need AI. There are already a wide variety of toys made for babies just like you." And on the screen he put up images of various Fisher-Price-style plastic pretend pianos and the like. Oliver continued on, talking about business issues related to AI, not least of which is AI's penchant for mining the internet for content from which it learns and then producing quickly, if not in an environmentally friendly way, content that earns lots of money through social media engagement for its operators without offering any kind of acknowledgement that somebody else created the source material first. And that somebody else is, by contrast, not making a penny off of this AI content. In short, AI is stealing intellectual property. But commenters online really latched onto that CEO's supposition about the majority of people, and that's something I want to focus on myself here. A post on Facebook by someone, I presume it was a human, whose name was Celine Callan, said, quote, "The slop is unethical in every single aspect. Generative AI is theft. Those who use it are not authors or artists, they're grifters profiting from real creatives." And they provided a link to the episode of Last Week Tonight, which I have included in this week's show notes if you want to watch the whole thing. A lot of commenters on Celine Callan's post made a lot of very pithy observations that, you will be unsurprised to know, caught my attention as a human maker of music with other humans in the wind band activity. One commenter, whose screen name was Patrick Gallagher, and I'm going to phrase it that way because I really don't have any idea whether it was a real human or a bot writing this comment, and trust me, that is its own separate topic. But anyway, for the sake of argument, I've chosen comments to include here that sound to me as if they were actually written by real humans. If you've been on social media lately, you may well have begun to be able to discern the sound of an AI voiceover or an AI-generated piece of writing or an AI-generated image for sure. Just look at the six-fingered hand or the slightly weird spelling of some word in the background. Sorry. Anyway, here's what the probable Patrick Gallagher probably wrote. Quote, "Humans made music before we had instruments. Humans made music before we had complex verbal language. Humans probably made music before we were Homo sapiens." The very act of using AI to make music demonstrates an error in understanding music as a human experience. You are taking a process that is the thing itself and assuming the outcome of that thing is the only part that matters. The most chaotic baby, banging on objects to make a pleasing noise, is more connected to the finest instrumentalist of our species than any product of automatically predicted next notes can ever be. A commenter probably called Magnus Wojcik wrote, quote, "You have to get really good. Yeah, and those practice sessions are some of the most fun parts, bro. I remember being in school, all of us walking over to my BFF's house on Friday after school, and we'd have like 5 of us sitting in her living room practicing our band music together and shooting the breeze. It was the best. Music is about connection and soul and community, not just the end result. I never made a career out of music, but all the hours and years I spent on music, on learning new instruments and songs and techniques, it'll always be a part of me, and I wouldn't trade that for any AI slop." Someone probably called Heather Stanko replied to Magnus's comment, saying, quote, "I am in a chorus. Every cycle we rehearse, and eventually we give a concert 3 or 4 times per year. I actually don't even like the performance part all that much. I'm there to make music with my community, and I figure the performance is, for me, part of the price I pay for the experience." Someone probably called Catherine C. Huckabee wrote, quote, "Music is so fun to make that most of the time it's not about being good. It's the same principle as karaoke night, getting on stage and belting out tunes that make you happy no matter how off-key you are. Yes, there are standards when making it for profit, but the majority of everyday people sing and make beats and chants because it's fun." Someone probably named Stephen Zumbrun wrote, with the sarcasm font turned all the way on, quote, "But I want money and acclaim without any effort, just because. Wah!" Someone probably called Ted Swift wrote that the CEO, quote, "sounds like he doesn't really understand what music is, what the point of it is. Yes, to make actual music takes practice, skill, mastery of an instrument, creativity, all the things he seems to be too lazy or lacks the attention span to develop." Someone whose screen name is Cthulhu Bad Crumble, and I promise you AI would not have made up that name, wrote, quote, "It's such a perfect encapsulation of the most annoying type of tech bro. That man would happily devote years of his life to creating something that would play music for him, but God forbid he spend those years just learning how to play an instrument himself, because that's not disrupting the music space or whatever. Like, yay for you if you want to build something that makes creating music more accessible to people who, for whatever reason, can't afford an instrument or don't have anyone to teach them or don't have the physical ability or whatever, but don't promote your work by denigrating the traditional way of doing things. Tech bros do that all the time, and it's so condescending." Someone probably called Frank Washburn wrote, with an arched eyebrow, quote, "Lifting weights is really hard and not enjoyable. Therefore, I just get a forklift to do my reps at the gym for me, and I also demand just as much respect and admiration for this endeavor as people give competitive athletes." Someone possibly called Dakota Odia wrote, quote, "These people don't ever understand that part of being an artist is doing the art. What you're going through in your life in the long run, how your day went, how your body feels, what the room you're in is like, all of it makes a difference throughout the whole process, whether it's playing music for a few minutes or writing a novel over several months. This all will never be captured by AI, and you'll never feel the same thing using AI as you would making art." Someone possibly called Ryland Skylar Thorne created a little sarcastic microdrama, quote, "Tech bro, I don't think anyone enjoys making music. Me, trying to stop myself from buying every new flute I see listed on Facebook Marketplace. Yeah, totally no one enjoys it." Someone probably named Liana Fleming wrote, quote, "Bro describes making music for profit and bashes it for not being fun. Bro, doing it for profit kills the fun. Also, has he never heard of jazz?" Someone possibly called Cody Gabriel wrote, quote, "Okay, for that guy, he is right about one thing. For some people, the process of making music isn't something they'll enjoy. But here's my lukewarm take. That's fine. Not every creative process is for everyone. I am absolutely poop at drawing, and I don't want to take the time to learn. Instead, I follow other creative talents that come naturally to me. If I need music made or art drawn, I will simply save money and commission someone who is talented in those fields to make it, over generating AI slop." A commenter possibly named Andy Wood wrote, quote, "This kind of glosses over a real cultural issue. He's describing the things you have to do to be good at making music: practice, familiarity, and dedication. This is normal, but then he says it isn't fun, which I will also co-interpret as rewarding. That makes a degree of sense since it's work, but that's also a bit of the issue. There has to be celebration along the journey. The fun is in the growth and the reciprocity of good feelings from those sharing your musical journey. So if that isn't there, then either the reward is missing or the journey is missing, and I'm going to err on the side of the latter." Someone with the glorious screen name of Maxatrillion Fatstacks wrote, quote, "It does get tedious and frustrating trying to make music, but everything gets that way. I live and breathe dirt biking and mountain biking, but sometimes I'm sore, the weather sucks, my bike breaks at an inopportune time, I crash on something I thought was easy, I'm trying to learn a new skill and can't get it, or I'm just not feeling the ride that day. But would I want an AI to steer my bike for me so I could do backflips and stuff without putting in any effort? Hell no. The whole point is that it's difficult, but challenging yourself is rewarding. If you get burnt out on whatever artistic passion or pursuit you have, then step away for a bit and try something else. And when you go back, you'll probably have a new perspective and appreciation for the thing you were working on. But for the love of God, don't just let AI do it for you. Not only is AI generated off stolen content, but I've never seen a single truly compelling piece of AI art or music. Sure, it's technically impressive, but it's less artistically compelling than the little plastic figurines you used to be able to get out of gumball machines. At least those took some imagination to design. Someone possibly called Daniel Doherty wrote, quote, "Reportedly, Ernest Hemingway said, 'There is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed.' Dorothy Parker said, 'I hate writing, but I love having written.' If writing music is the same, I'd imagine that people don't do it because they enjoy it. They do it because the long and painful process is the only way of getting to the part that they do enjoy." I might debate that last, but that's okay. Everybody gets an opinion. And finally, pithily, someone possibly named Gerald Vanderhoff wrote, quote, "AI isn't for music makers who want to do it easier. It's for music executives who want to have music without the bother of having to pay someone to make it." And in writing that, Mr. Vanderhoff used a semicolon correctly. He's not just human, he's a superior human. For the record, yes, the jingles and musical interludes utilized in every episode of this podcast are created inside a music notation software program called MuseScore. It's not AI, but it is synthetic. I'm currently on version 3, and if I were to upgrade to version 4, I would have access to musical instrument sounds that are much more realistic. For now, dear listener, you're hearing a synthesized wind band that I'm betting you knew very well was not a real group of humans playing. One reason I'm okay with that is the MuseScore tool has allowed me to create versions of the jingle to reflect such variables as different moods, different lengths, different fade-outs, all kinds of things that you may not even have been consciously aware of. One of my listeners, who is a member of the community band I keep banging on about, asked me early in the podcast's history, "So, when's the band going to record your podcast jingle?" I smiled and murmured something about not wanting to spend the kind of rehearsal time that it would take to get great recordings of absolutely all the permutations of the jingle that I've created in MuseScore. Plus, we don't have enough percussionists or the right marching percussion instruments on hand to faithfully execute what's on the score. So, am I a hypocrite? I don't think so, for at least a couple reasons. At no time did I go to an AI content generation tool and type, "Create a wind band jingle for a podcast." For one thing, heaven only knows what it would come up with that, forgive me, might not be reflective of any understanding of the band activity and its history whatsoever. For another thing, by writing and arranging and orchestrating the jingle myself with my own little fingers, I maintain what I think is complete control over the creative process. I didn't use any samples or garage bandy musical idea nuggets. It all came out of my head, which implies it came out of my experience with bands, my lived human experience. All the parts in the band score that make up the BandWagon jingle are technically playable by humans, and there are a couple of inside jokes and references in the jingle that no AI generator can produce, I promise you. It takes a truly subversive human mind to make this shit up. I suppose that I would be interested in seeing what an AI generator would come up with if I gave it those instructions, but only for the purposes of mocking it. In fact, there are AI tools for editing podcasts. They purportedly take care of the drudgery of having to painstakingly edit your podcast interviews and arrange all your dialogue and music and sound effect tracks. But I like the painstaking parts. I get the final say about what this podcast sounds like, following a vision that at best an AI tool can only mimic from having analyzed lots of other podcasts and taken the average. But nobody does it like I do, and I don't do it like anybody else, and that's called being a human. Or maybe I'm just a control freak. And, as long as we really should be looking at this through the band lens, given what this podcast is about ultimately, another thing AI can't do is reproduce the experience of going to a community band rehearsal, fighting hard to make music that is humanly imperfect, but also humanly emotional and inspired. And then, during the mid-rehearsal break, talking with my standmate about the Red Sox bullpen, and about how their kids are, and about this cool new mouthpiece I'm trying out, and about how much we're both looking forward to the band's next gig. So, continued points in the humans column. All right, let's observe a grand pause, the length of which I get to determine. And on the other side of that, the exciting conclusion of the conversation which started in episode 66 with Lieutenant Colonel Michael JOLIN. Hope you'll stick around. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. When last we left you, Mike JOLIN, early of the UMass Drumline, and then more recently of the U.S. Army by way of the Judge Advocate General Corps, was telling stories about his very early musical experience, and then about his time working for Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, after having finished a deployment to Afghanistan as a JAG lawyer. I reminded him of an exchange he and I shared on social media in 2011 during that deployment. In short, I'd had a bit of a tough day in the world of middle school music teaching, and as one does, I took to social media to explain it to the world. Very simply, I wrote, "Okay, I'm ready for a weekend." "Oh, only Monday, is it?" Clever, understated, not too whiny, just the right amount of mild desperation, not exactly a standing on the ledge ready to leap kind of post. Into the comment section jumped Mike, and he wrote, "And I was just thinking that I'm ready for the deployment to be over. Only 4 months to go. Freedom must be defended." Somewhat chastened and definitely reminded that no matter how hard one tries, one's sphere of awareness can occasionally shrink to the size of one's own head, I replied to his comment, writing, "This much is true. Perspective is a valuable thing. There are no IEDs in middle school." And subsequently I took to my blog to describe this exchange and wrote further, "On the way to school, I don't watch out for landmines, just potholes. At school, I get to teach fifth graders how to toot flutes. On my way home, I don't have to watch out for snipers. From the car to the front door of my house, I don't have to carry 50 or more pounds of military-issue equipment, and usually if the weather is stinky, it's only stinky for about 8 seconds, and then I'm standing safely under the front door overhang. The heat works, the electricity is reliable, and once I'm home from school, I can decide to fire up a burger, park my feet on the coffee table, and watch a little TV, pretty much at the moment the idea strikes." Anyway, shortly after that, Mike clicked like on my Facebook IED comment. Still, though, I continued to regret my moment of self-indulgence, and I sent my silent hopes for safety for our personnel in Afghanistan until our leaders saw fit to bring them back home. And Mike replied to my blog post saying, "No need to apologize, Rob. I'm not one of those soldiers who whine about doing all the heavy lifting on behalf of the nation while the rest of my fellow citizens are at the mall. I think that's dangerous thinking. It creates a sense of entitlement to things undeserving, an air of superiority, and perhaps even hubris that we have the answers because we chose to serve. And that's the key, isn't it? We chose to do this. Somehow that makes us better than other people? I don't think so. To me, people should live their lives as their conscience dictates, as their destinies are revealed to them. Just because a person chooses a career path that doesn't entail wearing a uniform doesn't mean he or she isn't serving. Can I say that my wife, a fourth-grade teacher, isn't serving? Indeed, it's arguable and very likely that her service is more important to our nation than mine." Unquote. If, dear listener, you heard the first half of our conversation in the last episode of this podcast, I trust you will have gotten the idea that Mike is exactly that kind of truly decent fella. After I reminded him of that social media exchange, our conversation continued, starting with that topic and forging onward. And here is the conclusion of that conversation.
When I did enlist, I know this is going to sound weird, but I actually did want to deploy at some level. I didn't want to grab a rifle but I wanted to do my part. I wanted to do more than be in the rear with the gear, which has ended up what I was. But I did want to do my part, whatever that looked like. So when I got the opportunity to deploy, I was actually pretty excited about it, especially as a JAG officer. I was not the tip of the spear, so I knew I was not going to be, in too much danger. But you're still in a war zone. That being said, they take very good care of us. We don't want for anything, especially in the situation I was in. There are a lot of our troops that, are in much more austere environments who do face danger all the time, at least back then. So I don't mean to, my situation was different than a lot of, service members. So when I downplay my situation, I'm not just being humble.
Yeah.
My situation really was not the situation of a lot of our Marines down in Helmand Province, our soldiers, like the 10th Mountain, I think, I think who that goes down in Kandahar. They were in the fight.
Yeah.
They were capturing the bad guys. They were doing the patrols. They were getting the ones getting blown up. We were up in Bagram, which is the largest military facility. It was on a large plateau that you could see for miles and miles, surrounded by these huge mountains. It's very beautiful. Very much like Utah is what it looked like. People think it was like desert. It was in the sense where we didn't get a lot of precipitation, but the weather was very temperate. It was very cool. Like warmer in the summer, cooler in the winter, just not a lot of rain. But the snow-capped peaks surrounded us. Down south was definitely what you consider more like Iraqish. Like people think Iraq is like Afghanistan, but it's really not.
Famously challenging terrain. It's the graveyard of empires, and there's a
Yes,
geographical reason
without
for
a
that.
doubt.
Yeah.
But we would have rocket attacks. So they would fire rockets into our facility, but it was 100 square miles. So it would have to really not be your day to get hurt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The chances are you're going to be getting hurt by tripping on something and breaking your leg, as opposed to, not to say people didn't get hurt, but there were thousands of us on this installation. It would really just not really be your day. So in fact, of all of the different rocket attacks, I only felt one in my chest where you could feel the percussive effects once in my year that I was there, just to give you a sense of how much danger I was in. Oh, but so you were talking about your bad day.
Yes. The upshot of both of our thoughts here is there are different intensities of tough days depending on where you are in the
my
world.
tough day was like nothing compared to some of these Marines and some of these infantry soldiers of ours. They're eating the MREs, the crappy meals in the brown plastic bags. They're sleeping in their Humvees or what have you. So there's different degrees. A lot of times what I tell people when they talk about sacrifice for our military members, and this is real, so I don't downplay this, is that a lot of it is you're just missing a lot of life that people take for granted. Whether it's your friends or family's birthdays or the first communion of your niece or the birthday of your daughter, your mother and father's wedding anniversary, these different life moments that you're just not there for. Going to that little league game or could be a little thing, but you're just not there for it because you're doing something else which you need to be there for on behalf of your country, your community. And that's that's okay, that's what you sign up for, but that's the sacrifice you make. To me, it's less about the dramatic giving up your life, which obviously is the ultimate sacrifice, and many do, but it's a very small amount. Most of us, the sacrifice we give is the opportunity cost that most people take for granted that they get to do that we don't.
Yes, it is smaller from a life crisis standpoint, but it's no less significant.
No, exactly. And we even see it, especially like a National Guard situation or a reserve situation, where you have a work life, where you have a family life, but you're giving up all of that when you have to deploy. You're putting your career on hold. You're putting your family on hold. So you can do this because somebody needs to do it. Or sometimes our leaders make the wrong choice and doesn't need to be done, but that's another story.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, that's a different podcast. But it's part of the all-volunteer force where at least we have people who are willing to do this. And I wanted to be part of that because we need people to do that. And I wanted to at least be able to say I did my part. And there's other ways that people do their parts, whether it's contributing to their church, whether it's contributing to the scouts, whether it's, there's a million different ways that people give back to their communities. So I don't mean to say, I joined the military, so I did mine and you didn't do yours.
This is the only way, yeah.
But that was just one way I knew I could, and I'm glad I do.
Hi there, it's present moment Rob here, jumping in with a bit of context, because otherwise the leap from one topic to another might be impenetrable. My conversation with Mike wandered hither, thither, and yon at this point in ways that might be murky if you weren't, one or the other of us. So many inside jokes. But we did head back in the direction of the States and the present moment and the band activity via some of his thoughts about a hobby that he's taken up in the wake of his military service, a hobby that you would think he'd have had his fill of while in the service, but never mind, to each his own.
Because one of the ties between the hiking part and the band part
is
the ability to suffer.
And the
in the
hiking,
military.
the hiking is in the context of
So as a hobby, like aside from playing bass as a part-time thing to keep my hand in music, I don't do a ton of physical activity. Like I'm not a big weightlifter or I'm not a weightlifter at all, but I used to run. I ran a lot in Afghanistan and then just to keep busy and then afterwards. But the one thing I've always done a lot in the past 10, 15 years is started hiking and backpacking, which eventually led me to hike the length of Vermont on the Long Trail, where I started at the Canadian border and hiked all the way to the Massachusetts border and a little bit beyond because the Massachusetts border is in the middle of the woods. So I had to finish 3 more miles to get to Route 2. But one of the things which I always kind of equate to, like, of having the ability to do that, and one of the reasons I think I was successful at marching band, not being like the most gifted musically, was one, being able to put in the work in the woodshed. And I mentioned him a few times, but my classmate, because we came in together at the same time, Jim Hoover, he was the one that taught me how to play quads. Because I came in as a bass drummer and we would have these sessions and we would play together. And he would teach me, right? Just me and him. Just practicing chopping wood and it was because of him that I was able to play quads. And so, I've told him this and I've thanked him before and I'm thanking him again publicly now. But that's a lot of hard work, right? But when we put it on the field, I knew my success or what I could contribute was being there on time, which of course meant being there early, right? It also meant getting to my spot first, right? It meant knowing where my spot was. It meant running to my spot, not walking, all those things, it's like not complaining. It's like I always hated complainers. Like I couldn't stand that. It's like we're here to suffer together. There was a joy in the suffering because at the end of the day, we're making this great thing together. Like there's joy in this suffering because without the suffering, there is no joy at the end of this. Because otherwise, it's going to suck. Because if we don't suffer, then it's not going to, there's no work and there's no hard work and it's going to suck. So, and that was one of the things that, Tom didn't put in those exact words, but that was part of the ethos. Like he always said that his favorite part of this whole enterprise was the practice, the rehearsal. He didn't really care for the shows. Like that was whatever. To him, his fun was actually going through the rehearsals and, the drills and going again, doing this. That's what he liked.
It's the process. It probably teaches you more than the uniform and the clapping.
Exactly. Which, to be honest, I always like the show too, just because, there's a little bit of adrenaline there and, but anyway, to go back to the whole suffering part, I think, and that's why the military, in order to excel, there's some suffering. Because if you're going to be working hard, if you're going to be going through what you need to go through to get to be great, you need to suffer a little bit because
success without a little bit of stress or hard work, it's a little hollow.
That's what it was. It's like, oh, we got to run through it again. Got to run through it again. It's hot. You want to do this. You're hungry. It's not fun sometimes, but you got to put in the work.
Yeah. And everybody with you is also hot and hungry and
exactly. And that's part of the joy because you're doing this collective enterprise. Unless you're hiking and you're doing a solo, but again, you're in a place where you understand this is what it takes in order to do this. I wouldn't call it a great thing, but a cool thing. The type 2 kind of fun, where it's cool after you're done with it. So there you go. That's one of the life lessons that I learned.
In the early days of this podcast, the questions that I posed toward the end of a conversation to wrapped up with a question about, is there a life lesson from your band experience that has meant something to you later in life? And there it sits. How about
I got
that?
ahead of you.
Yeah. So the other questions that I finish up with, slightly less strictly resume-based questions. First one is always, is there a piece of band music that you have played outdoors or indoors that you would consider one of your favorites?
This is cliche, but I'm going to do it anyway. There is something about Malaguena that just wails, especially with a huge 400-person band. I think we only did it once in the 4 years that I was there, but I heard about it. And when we finally did it, I don't know if it was my junior year, It was just so much fun. It wasn't the most complicated piece we did. That was probably, like Jupiter or something,
Oh,
which
for sure.
I absolutely loved Jupiter. I think we played it 3 times, but I absolutely loved it. But that was another piece. I also loved Festive Overture that year too. But so my favorite piece recently that I did at the School of Rock thing that I do was Judas Priest's version of Diamonds and Rust by Joan Baez, which I'd never heard of. She wrote it in 1975 after she received this random phone call from Bob Dylan. I didn't realize that her and Bob Dylan had a little bit of a thing for a couple of years in the mid 60s. I guess it's in that movie that recently came out about him. She was more into him than him into her. He broke her heart, blah, blah, blah. They end up splitting up, but he still would call every now and then, kind of toy with her, and she wasn't really that happy about that. So this one time in 75, he calls her while he was on the road, and she ends up writing Diamonds and Rust about this. And if you listen to the lyrics, they're wonderful lyrics. And it's about memories. What memories bring you? They bring you diamonds and rust. Like over time, what does time do? Like for coal, it can create diamonds, which are beautiful, or it can create rust, out of iron, which is bad. It can create many things. And that's what you're doing to me here with this conjuring up all this good and bad. Why are you doing this to me kind of thing? So Rob Halford, the singer for Judas Priest, just 2 years after the song came out, heard it and said, "Boy, I can make this into a heavy metal song." And he did. And it became a staple of their live show for 3 decades. And we played it, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had on stage in my life.
The 180-degree opposite question: is there a piece of band music in whatever context that you haven't played but you would like to?
We couldn't have done it because it didn't exist at the time. But I really love what a lot of the marching bands are doing with more contemporary rock or heavy metal stuff. Like when they have the competitions for the Metallica stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be necessarily be Metallica. It could be other bands. I just think that's really cool to kind of blend genres. Doing that Metallica thing where Metallica is judging different bands. What a wonderful way to kind of integrate, different genres. You could do it with Ozzy Osbourne songs.
Oh, now you could. Mike, you will think this odd, but an ending section question just occurred to me to ask. I don't know if I would have reason to ask every one of my interview subjects this, but given your particular situation and background and your claim that you weren't the best musician in the world, not that one has to be, do you have a band influence? And by that, I think I mean, is there someone you can point to who was a band role model to you? In your case, as you were about to take charge of the 88th Army Band, maybe, or maybe somebody who offered you specific advice or set an example that was especially helpful to you or memorable.
I actually wrote to Heidi when I took over the 88th Army Band.
That being Heidi Sarver, the recently retired band director of the University of Delaware, who was also our drum major in the UMass days. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Because I had no idea what I was doing. Right. And granted, I wasn't in the same exact role because I wouldn't be like writing a show. I wouldn't be directing, but I was still going to be leading. As a JAG officer, as an Army lawyer, you're always advising. Like one of the things that I always told new commanders, because I always talk to the new commanders, I always wanted them to know you're not on an island. Like you have people here to support you. Because being in command, which I quickly learned, I had heard throughout my career, it's a lot of responsibility because you are responsible for all of these soldiers, for everything about them. So one of the things I always told the new commanders was, like, I advise you decide. Like, my role is not to be the commander. That's your job. So don't come to me and say, what do I do? I said, I'm happy to give you my advice, but ultimately, this is your decision, not my decision. And I just want to make that clear that they're the ones. Like, so you need to take that responsibility seriously. However, because I'd been in for a long time, I'd been an attorney for a long time. Like, I'm not going to not tell you what I think you should do if you asked. But at the same time, it's not my decision to make. But now it was my decision to make. So I was trying to find the best people I could think of, both within the military, commanders who I really respected, and there were a lot. We were very fortunate to have some wonderful leaders in our military, both at the National Guard level and even at the active duty component level. But I also was like, geez, I really need somebody I really respect at the band level. And so I thought, geez, let me reach out to Heidi. We weren't like buddy buddies, but we knew each other. But she was very gracious, and I just reached out to her privately. I said, "Hey, I'm taking over this. Can you give me just a few?" And she was very gracious and wrote me this thing. I know nothing about the military, but here are some things.
Leadership is leadership.
Yes. So I tried to incorporate that with what I did when I took over command. And unfortunately, I took over command after they just relieved the commander. Because normally they don't make a lawyer the band commander.
Fair to say, yeah.
He'd been there a long time. He didn't necessarily do anything wrong specifically, aside from allowing some stuff to fester that he should have, especially in today's climate, and not even in even yesterday's climate, it was unacceptable. Like low grade systemic stuff. Definitely corrosive, toxic, low level enough, but corrosive. Like not the kind of culture you want. And it'd been going on long enough. He wasn't fixing it, and enough was enough. And finally, there was a brigade commander who was willing to do something about it. Because in the National Guard, you have all these units that kind of fall under a kitchen sink brigade. Because you have, the Army Band, you have the engineer company, you have an aviation battalion of Blackhawks, you have a couple of infantry companies. So they're all unrelated, but they all kind of fall under this one brigade. And so when the Army needs to deploy, they'll pick up this group, they'll pick up that group, and they'll put them all under what they should be in theater. So they'll take this engineer company and they'll take that engineer company and they'll put them under an engineer battalion from Texas and they'll send those, so that's how they put it together. And so the band, they always had good musicians. They always did their mission. They had a lot of good sergeants. So they just kind of like didn't focus on it. And finally, it got to the point where this brigade commanders came in and said, look, we got to fix the band. So they got rid of some of the sergeants and they got rid of the band commander. They knew that I played music. They knew I was in the marching bands at UMass. I was very proud of it. So I told everybody. And by this point, I worked directly for the adjutant general. He's the 2-star general that oversees the National Guard in Rhode Island. So I worked directly on my state side as his deputy. He was a music guy, so we loved to talk about it. So I had a reputation as being the music guy. So this brigade commander says, "Hey, Mike, would you like to be the band commander?" And I said, "Sir, I'm a lawyer. You know that." I goes, "Mike, I heard you're a musician." I said, "I am, but not a good one." "So why do you want me to be the band commander?" And I've said this because I know they're good. I've heard them play. They play at the inauguration, at the governor's inauguration. I've seen them in the parades. They're decent players. He says, "I just need you for a couple of years. We've got somebody in mind to be a bandmaster, but I need somebody to take over for now." And I was almost at the end of my career. I just retired last month after 20 long years. So I said, okay. And best experience I had in the whole military. So that was really, as I think I mentioned earlier, being around these young musicians who are also soldiers, who loved being in the Army. They loved doing the shoot, move, and communicate thing. They loved getting lost in the woods with compasses. They loved going to the range. They loved being physically fit, but they loved playing their trombone or their clarinet, their bass drum. It's just a great unit. We've got a brass funk band. We've got a rock band. We've got this like acoustic 70s rock thing going on. Plus we've got I hesitate to call it a concert band because it's a smaller 25-person, or like a ceremonial band. And we also have like a brass quintet or a woodwind quintet. But anyway, it's been a blast.
And ordinarily at the end of these things, I say, do you have a favorite band story you like to tell? That sounds like it.
Yeah, two of my favorite moments with the band was when I first took command. I knew I'm not a great public speaker unless I really practice and read my speech over and over again. I'm not a good ad-libber. And I knew these people didn't know me at all because I just never served with them. And so here I coming in after they just lost their commander, who was a longtime commander, a lot of uncertainty, like, who is this guy? And so I really had to make a good impression. So I really knew it was important. And that's why I reached out to Heidi. That's why I reached out to these other people. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but so we had this little change of command where you hand over the flag of the actual unit. the sergeant hands it over to the brigade commander, then hands it over to me, and then I hand it over to I forget who we handed it over to, and then hands it back to the sergeant. So it kind of like passes it over to the new commander, which is me, and it's like symbolizes the transfer of authority. And then I give this speech to the troops, kind of tell them what I'm going to do, and I think it went well. I said, you know what? Here it is. Here I go. Like I'm going to take this thing. I'm going to really try to do right by these wonderful human beings who decided to serve their country by playing music. I felt like I was given this gift. And so that was a wonderful feeling. And then at the end, this past month, I did another change of command. So I gave the flag back, the guidon, they call it, back to the person that took over for me. And we found a wonderful candidate for that. So I was so excited about that. But the band wanted to do a special song for me. So that's why I knew, that I'd made an impact. And so if you see my Facebook feed, I'm a huge Liverpool Football Club fan. Our song, of course, is You'll Never Walk Alone. We do the version that Jerry and the Pacemakers did from the early 60s. It's from the musical, of course. Was it Carousel?
It is.
Yes. So they wanted to surprise me. Said, we're going to do this special selection. So we did the whole ceremony with the guidon, and then they had some awards, for me. I thumped my chest, and they pinned me on these medals, and they said, thank you for your service and to our great nation. The band's going to do this song. And they kept it a secret from me. They told me to leave the building when they rehearsed it. One of our new members, who is a master's in composition from URI, I went to his recital. He's a bassoonist. And his final song, he's also a Liverpool fan, was You'll Never Walk Alone. And I heard he was conducting this piece that they were going to do. So I kind of put two and two together, but I didn't tell them. And they did it, though. But they had the vocalist. Our vocalist did it. She's a wonderful singer. And it was beautiful. Brought tears to my eyes. But I knew I hit my mark, I guess. Or at least I accomplished what I wanted to do, to kind of bring some healing and also take them to hopefully the right path, so they can then take it to the next level where they wanted to go. So I was very, very, very excited where we ended up and what the future holds for them. And I got to finish my career on a high note, literally.
Well, legal professional, retired lieutenant colonel, bass player, Mike JOLIN, it has been a pleasure to sit and chat, as always, but particularly in the pursuit of a bunch of topics that I will be honest, I didn't know much about, and I have learned a ton as regards to where you've been and what you've done. Thanks again for sharing your time and your stories, and may good fortune follow you wherever your career takes you next.
Thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, we'll take a quick water break and then more Bandwagon. Here comes the dogfight. In this episode's dogfight, point, counterpoint. In this little social media back and forth, everyone is being very earnest and good-hearted, and nobody is yelling. I know, it's weird. But the point, which was a Facebook post by someone called Mercy Lupo, is a good example of why, let's just say, the rest of the world views music as a valuable subject to include in schools. And the counterpoint, which was generated by one of my other very early trio section guests, Kristen Murphy, sharing the Lupo post and making commentary, is a gigantic yes and which, laid out alongside this week's second strain thoughts about human-made versus machine-generated music, makes its own strong case for why machines should never replace humans as creators of music. So, here we go. Here's the Mercy Lupo post from August 2nd. Quote, "Research shows your child's future in math might begin with music. Not with drills, not with flashcards, not with forced worksheets at age 3, but with rhythm, clapping games, singing lullabies, tapping spoons in the kitchen. Because music doesn't just touch the heart, it rewires the brain." According to an article in a prominent neurological research journal back in 1997, children exposed to music early show enhanced mathematical and spatial reasoning. Why? Because rhythm teaches the brain to recognize patterns. Because melody strengthens memory. Because musical play lights up the same brain areas that are responsible for logic, sequencing, and problem solving. This isn't just play. It's cognitive development in motion. But here's what we keep doing. Cutting music from classrooms, prioritizing early academics over creativity, treating musical expression like a luxury instead of a launch pad. Meanwhile, science is screaming. Music builds brains, and not just math brains, regulated brains, connected brains, resilient, joy-filled, creative brains. So, when your child is humming, banging on pots, making noise that doesn't make sense, don't hush them, join them. Because that noise, that rhythm, that beat, it's building something deeper than grades. Focus, memory, emotional regulation, pattern recognition. Music isn't extra, it's essential. So, sing together, dance barefoot in the living room, let them drum, strum, and play even if they are off-key, because behind every offbeat song might just be a child wiring their brain for brilliance. Ta-da! Nothing wrong with that. But 5 days later came the response from Kristen, who notably is a third-grade classroom teacher of some experience. She wrote, quote, "I'm fine with posts like these which connect early and continued immersion in music to math, academic success, and executive functioning, particularly if it convinces families, teachers, and administrators to include music in young people's days. But the study and playing of music and the playful nature of musical experimentation needs no justification for doing. Music isn't important only through its connection to subjects or study skills which society may deem more worthy than music itself. The practice of making and studying music stands on its own and reminds us that we are humans with souls. Music is not merely a pathway to excellence in that which any particular society deems important and legitimate. Music is itself worthy of our focus and effort for its own sake. My husband, a freelance musician, asked our children every night at dinner, 'What happened during the most important part of your day?' We always laughed, and they knew to tell him about all their music classes, lessons, and ensembles. I hope one day society will value all the disciplines, and it won't be so challenging to justify keeping classes such as music away from the chopping block. I hope one day that young would-be musicians won't have to worry about making a professional living doing what they're meant to do in this world. Until then, I will be happy to pass on both research that justifies the inclusion of music in everyone's lives and essays such as this one which collate all the benefits of playing and learning music. Dear listener, I put this in the dogfight section, even though there were no clickbait punchlines. If this had been an actual online conversation, it would probably be the most courtly thing you'd have read all week. Nobody destroyed anyone else. So unlike social media. Again, Kristen's response was a giant yes and, or more accurately, a case of that argument is fine as far as it goes. Okay, one last pause to catch our breath, and then we'll wrap things up for this episode. Thanks so much for continuing to listen. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA, I spotted an item on Facebook that made me smile and then chuckle, and I thought I'd see if it hits you the same way. It was a Venn diagram with two circles, one of which was completely inside the other. The larger circle was labeled Things That Make You a Better Musician, and the smaller circle inside of it was labeled Things That Make You a Better Person. The items inside the Things That Make You a Better Musician circle included scales, chords, ear training, arpeggios, lyrics, tunes, and craft. The items inside the Things That Make You a Better Person circle, which is to say things that make you a better musician and a better person, included discipline, practice, listening, honesty, patience, thoughtfulness, love, humility, heartbreak, and not clapping on 1 and 3. Truer words were never put into Venn diagram circles. And that's a wrap for this episode of BandWagon. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media, from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at the pod's website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like or what you think might change. You can do that using the email address heybandwagon@yahoo.com or leave a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that I do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to this episode's news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, Mike JOLIN, can be found in our show notes, as can a link to BandWagon's merch store, thanks to the good folks at TeePublic. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, please do share it in the direction of someone whom you think might not be a listener yet. Word of mouth really is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with the podcast, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again in about a fortnight. I'm Rob Hammerton. Detail, fall out.